This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, an update from the USDA on farm income numbers for this year, and we go to Chad Colby's Christmas gift list in a bit. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast. Mr. Pearson and I are getting ready to, well, we're excited about looking at those holiday gift ideas.
I know I sure am, Max. I always get great ideas of things that I decide I really, really want when Chad Colby's in the studio.
Yeah, he sells stuff for these companies, doggone it. That's how it works out, because I wind up buying. It was interesting looking at the USDA's updated numbers the other day on cash receipts for this year. As far as the ag industry is concerned now, expenses have climbed. According to the USDA, they've gone up 8%. That's the projection for 2021, up 8% for the year. Farm cash receipts, though, up 18%. And when you look at the individual categories, the grains, corn cash receipts up 52%. That's the projection for all of this year. Soybeans up 21%, wheat up 25%. Some interesting numbers there.
There are, Max. You know, that just certainly ties to the fact that we have had much stronger prices than we were expecting throughout this past year. But those expenses numbers are the ones that have me nervous as we get ready to move into 2022.
There's a lot of concern about the season ahead, not just prices, but as you know, availability too.
That is a concern. But first, we've got to get through Christmas. And every year since 1964, Congress has had a Christmas tree, and Patrick Haggerty brings us that story.
Architect of the Capitol, Brett Banton, officially accepted this year's tree from the Six Rivers National Forest in Northern California.
This year, the tree comes from the great state of California. I'd like to thank the U.S. Forest Service for finding and providing this incredible 84 foot tall white fir tree for the Capitol.
It took a 125-foot crane to lift the 84-foot tree and get it into position on the west front of the Capitol. The tree met all of the requirements for a Capitol Christmas tree, as well as maintaining the health of the forest.
So the architect of the Capitol is the one who chooses the tree every single year. They have the ability to be able to pick from one of the 154 forests. This year, the Six Rivers National Forest was selected to provide the 2021 People's Tree. And there are 3 requirements that they gave us: between 60 and 80 feet, a nice conical shape, you know, equal on all sides like a perfect Christmas tree, and also in an area that we can easily get to. But it was important for us at the Six Rivers to add one more element, and that was to find a tree in an area that was already overgrown, an area that we knew we had to thin out anyway, because in California we're prone to wildfires.
It's a California tree with 6,000 ornaments that represent every aspect of the state. The 25-day cross-country trip included 27 stops that produced large crowds and lots of Christmas joy. Here's the final product of all that work. Merry Christmas to you and to everyone you love. Patrick Haggerty, This Week in Agribusiness.
That Christmas spirit is in the air. Thanks to Patrick Haggerty for that update from Washington, D.C. Now it's time to turn our focus to the markets. Joining us this week is Darren Newsom of Darren Newsom Analysis. And Darren, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
I always enjoy it, Mike. Thanks for having me on again.
You know, we were looking for some Christmas gifts, and we got an update that the corn grind for ethanol in the month of October was the largest we've seen since before January of 2020. Darren, that's a good sign. Is this ethanol demand expected to stay strong throughout the spring?
That's a great question. It could. You know, so much is going to depend on whether or not, you know, we see our seasonal drop off in travel and driving demand. That's what we used to see pre-pandemic. And, you know, it's been a frenzy since, you know, the doors opened again. Right now, from what I understand, the winter weather is supposed to be relatively mild, so that could keep people on the road. That could keep, you know, folks, that could keep strong support underneath corn from ethanol. So, you know, as long as the weather, you know, permits, I would say that we're going to have demand.
All right, Darren, looking out to next year. Next year's the 2022 growing season. Growers are making those decisions on their acres, corn and beans. As you're looking at break evens for the next growing season's crop, where does your brain take you? Are we going to see more corn acres this next year?
I don't think it's a matter of break even. I think it's a matter of, number one, what's the cost of fertilizer going to be, and is there going to be fertilizer available? U.S. likes to plant corn, and I know the initial talk earlier this fall was, we were going to see a huge drop off, a huge decrease in corn acres. I don't think that's going to happen. Could we see a switch? Yeah, it's all going to come down to fertilizer price and availability. Right now, I'm not going to put much into it. We'll see how the debate goes this winter. We'll see if the supply chain works itself out. If we don't have the fertilizer, we're going to lose some corn acres.
That makes sense. Darren, we've got a long way, of course, before we get to that next growing season. As we go throughout this winter, do you see strength in the corn market holding?
I like the corn market. I mean, we've got future spreads. Basically, on the 21-22 are getting close to going inverted. The new crop spreads are already inverted. So this tells me that the market's fundamentally bullish. In my latest calculation of available stocks to use, it was trimmed quite a bit at the end of November as compared to October. And this was, even after we had a good-sized harvest. So, we've got tightening supplies. We've got strong demand. It's a good combination for corn heading into the winter.
It is, Darren, and I know you are from wheat country. The wheat market has been something to watch over the past several months. Do you see that continuing here at least through the end of this 2021?
Yeah, it's been incredible. It's been an absolute, all three markets have just been fascinating to watch. And I remember the old adage I learned a long time ago was don't be long wheat in December. I think we can set that aside this year because there's just really no indication this market wants to top out. There's nothing out there that's saying that demand's all of a sudden going to go away or supplies are going to increase. So yeah, it looks like wheat may want to spend the winter going higher.
Wheat acres going to grow in 2022?
I don't think significantly. We could see some. I've heard talk of some. A lot will happen. A lot will depend on what happens weather-wise over the winter in the northern plains to see if we put more spring wheat in, after they were just rocked last year and the crop was decimated by drought.
Yeah, that spring wheat market has been moving. We'll have more with Darren Newsom when we return. We're going to talk soybeans. We're going to talk the livestock market and the U.S. dollar index, what to expect as 2021 comes to a close. Stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. And we're back talking markets with Darren Newsom of Newsom Analysis. And Darren, I wanted to ask you about the dollar index, the value of the U.S. dollar versus other currencies in the world. It has been climbing steadily over the past 6 months. Is that going to continue?
It's interesting, Mike. We saw the dollar index get to almost 97 cents in late November, then backed off just a little bit. And then to start December, we jumped into the new month with Fed Chairman Powell saying that we were going to quicken the pace of tapering, so quickening, slowing. So I always thought that was interesting. But the tapering is going to happen at a faster pace. This tells us a couple things. One, that there's a general sense that the economy is still improving, economy is still strong, and that we could be seeing interest rates sooner in 2022. Now, the dollar itself, from a technical point of view, when it hit almost 97 and backed off, starting to feel a little bit top heavy in here, and that doesn't seem to make sense with the fundamental news. If the dollar starts to break and some of the global currencies start to firm, that could also bring some buying back to the commodity sector in general.
Well, with that being said, the Brazilian real has certainly been weaker. Darren, this has been pushing more purchases down to Brazil from the Chinese, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. And the biggest thing was, Brazil ran out of soybean supplies, basically. Early talk is, and I know it's only late May, early June, the equivalent of down in Brazil at this point, so you can't really get a good feel for the crop. And there's a lot of chatter about how it could be a record crop this year if weather cooperates, and that's always the question. And if the real stays cheap and the dollar stays strong, it could certainly push the U.S. back to its secondary supplier role, which is what we moved to over the last few years.
Darren, the domestic demand seems very strong. USDA NASS reported that October saw record processing of soybeans domestically, largely for bean oil and bean meal. Where do you see this heading as the calendar flips to 2022?
Yeah, fundamentally, no one should be surprised by the fact that the crush number came in big. I mean, we've seen future spreads showing some buying. Basis has just been incredible, incredibly strong over the course of harvest. Even though beans were being sold into the system so that corn could be tucked away. So I think over the course of the winter, until we have a better feel for South America's crops, I think we're going to continue to see some commercial support in this market. I think soybeans should go higher. I don't know that we're going to take out last year's high, particularly if weather cooperates with Brazil. Then we're going to start to see the pressure come back into soybeans as we get into towards spring. But for the winter, I think soybeans have a chance to move higher.
All right, some bullish attitudes there. Darren, does that bullish attitude carry on into the cattle market?
To me, cattle are a great economic indicator, and there's been so much talk about, the economy this and the economy that. We've seen cash market jump to 138, 140. We've seen futures continue to climb, so I still see that we've got a big supply of cattle. I think that's a problem. We have to keep demand. So the issue is, will that demand stay strong over the course of the winter? Right now, it would not surprise me to see cash back off a little bit, and if that happens, then I think we're going to see the futures come down. I don't think it's going to wreck, but I think we could see this market cool off just a bit heading into the winter.
So with this cooling off, Darren, you see live cattle in the spring dropping into the low 130s?
It wouldn't be surprising. I mean, that's still a good price. Then we're going to have to look at, what's feeders and fats and all of these. How does it work out? Right now, it would not be too surprising over the course of the winter to be close to that low 130s. So setting the stage, for that price level as we head into spring.
All right. Darren Newsom of Newsom Analysis, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Well, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas indeed. And every December, we bring in this guy who has all kinds of gift-giving ideas for us. Chad Colby, I've bought more stuff at your suggestion and things I love.
Just blame it on me, Max.
Yes.
Blame it on me.
In fact, I did buy a headlight, but it's not as nice as this one. I'm telling you, this is the really nice one. This reminds me, my dad and I used to go out hunting at night, and we had those old carbide lamps. I mean, this is light years.
Well, those are so nice, Max, because when you turn your head, you don't have that beam of light moving. It gives you like 110 degrees of light. Mike, that looks pretty snazzy there.
It is pretty snazzy. I like the different modes. We can go off. We've got bright, dim, red for a scenario. I mean, this really kind of covers all the bases for a wearable light. Chad, how do these things charge? Is this a rechargeable battery?
So the one you have has batteries in it. The one Max has rechargeable. Great gifts. They make them in different brightnesses, so different sizes, from about $40 and up, and they really work well. I've got a couple of them, and I did have a couple of them. But they work really good.
Lightbands.com, LITEBANDS.com.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Well, Chad, we've also got some very cool drones. I love this little guy. Chad, tell us a little bit about this one.
So we debuted that about a year ago. That drone's been out, so you can. It's basically the seasoned drone now. It's got a lot of great experience, but you get a full-size controller. But the nice part about that is what Mike's showing too in that controller is you just throw your phone on it and it works right away. But the size of that drone, the size of that case, it's literally as light as a can of Diet Coke.
It is. It's really tough to believe just how lightweight this thing is. What kind of range do you get on this size of drone?
You're basically limited by the FAA, so you have to keep the drone within your eyesight. Now, all of a sudden, we don't have challenges with the technology. It'll easily go. It'll easily fly without any trouble. But it's got sonar, auto takeoff, auto land, all that fun stuff. That's kind of that entry model drone, under $800 max, does a great job. But the drone over here, the big guy, this is kind of what the industry has been waiting for. This is that next gen. So some of the technology you'll see in this is a better battery. So we're flying north of 30 minutes now.
Oh, wow.
And the sensor's quite a bit improved. It's just a lot better widget, and this has only been out for about the last month.
I remember when you had to pick up bed of your truck filled with batteries. You don't have to be Mr. Batteries anymore.
Yeah, you don't. And the flight time is what's fixing that, Max. When you've got a 30-minute flight time, That's a huge deal with drones. And of course, they've improved the controllers. So you've got an upgraded controller like this if you want. You're going to spend some more money on this package. You're going to be in the mid-3s by the time you get a case and all those things. And then if you wanted the upgraded controller, I just got it actually this week, and it's about $1,250. So there's a little more cost point here, but the quality of the image is what you're paying for.
FlyingAg.com?
You bet. They'll take great
So
care of
you want to keep your equipment looking good.
Yeah.
Is there a good reason to do that? The guy asks.
Well, I think the reality
Other
with
than pride, seriously, retail, the trade-in value.
Yeah, no question. You know, I grew up from the fact that you washed it off good, you got some soap from mom, or you use some of the new foams they have today, and we all know how to wash our stuff. But the real art of this is how do you protect that paint? And what if your paint is tired? You know, what if you've got a Magnum that's 20 years old, Max? You and I have seen them where that hood gets chalky and gets ugly. Well, for most of us, it was go to your auto parts store and get a pad for your old side grinder back at the house, and you start buffing away. None of us had any idea, and Mike, you've got one in front of you, that you could have a tool like that to go in and basically have the technology that can fix it. And
there are various products that you can use to buff that finish.
That's
you've got something you're bringing up.
I am here. So basically, what these tools do is. A tool like this or Mike's, it's using the specific tool with the correct pad and the product to bring back the paint, right? So you're using the right stuff. Once you've done that, well, yes, Max, then things get a little carried away because now we've got some new coating products that you can use that really change the game.
The ceramic coatings, Chad, you had these on a little while ago. What's the advantage?
Well, it's just durability. It's instead of doing the old elbow grease job to install this like you used to, a polish or anything else, you can use these great products now, and it works so good. You do it just once a year, and it holds up really well.
And finally, we have a bunch of books. Oh, Lee Cloncher's John Deere book. For the people who've been waiting for Lee to become green. He's had those great International Harvester books, and he has downsized red combines. That's coming back on a smaller, it won't conk you out when it hits your head in bed. And then some others. We'll talk with Lee next week, by the way, about his offerings for the holiday season. You have some other books, too. We'll post that on the This Week in Agribusiness Facebook page. And again, next week, we'll go over it as well. Happy holidays, Chad Colby would say, with all of these offerings. There's more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. Stay with us.
Thanks for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. Max, this time of year, we've got all this equipment coming out of the fields, and one of the things that everybody notices is that our stock quality, the composition of the stock in the field is stronger than ever thanks to BT corn, and that can do some damage to some tires.
Yeah, you know, the folks at Firestone Ag say this is a good time, not just to clean up the machinery to put it away, but to check the tires to make sure there isn't any damage there ahead of the season when you need the equipment next year. I visited with Brad Harris about that. He's with Firestone Ag. In fact, he also farms, and he shared with me some insight.
As we're getting ready to put our equipment away for the winter, let's make sure that we're inspecting the tires themselves on that piece of equipment. Just trying to figure out, should we be planning purchases for 2022. So with the Firestone Ag, we've got a 7-step checklist on our website with a video to show growers what to look for on the tires. Let's see if we've got enough tread depth as we go into 2022, or if we've got stubble damage and if we should replace those product before we get into the planting season. Just like everything else, demand is strong right now for ag tires, and if customers are used to 3 years ago when you could go into any store and they'd have plenty of product available, we're on a very tight supply right now, Max, and we're encouraging customers to get those orders in early so that as we get into planting season, we're not waiting for product to show up.
As we clean up the equipment, put it away in the shed for the winter time, is there guidance to the grower also about checking inflation? How much does tire inflation matter when it's stored in the winter?
Right, so when we're putting equipment away, I always encourage customers to make sure that we've got plenty of inflation pressure into those tires as we're storing it. I encourage customers to set it more at the max inflation pressure. Just over time, a tire will naturally lose air. It's not 100% impervious to losing inflation pressure. So we don't want to put something away with minimum inflation pressure and then come back to it 3 months later and find that we have a flat on that tire. All that does is cause cussing. People get mad at each other. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So let's inflate those tires up to the max inflation pressure. That way when we come back into it, to pull that thing out, whatever it is, we've got plenty of inflation pressure to move it to the shop to do that final inspection.
What happens to a tire when it does go down? Does it weaken the integrity of the tire itself?
If the tire just goes flat and we're not moving it, it typically doesn't cause any damage to that product. The damage comes if we see it's flat and we decide, oh, I think I can move this 5 feet away from the wall so I can get an air line on it. Moving it that short amount of distance does cause damage to that product. So that's why we want to make sure that when we put it away, we can get to all those transport tires easily, so if we do get low inflation pressure, we can air it up and not do damage to that tire.
Is there anything else on that guideline that you haven't addressed, that list of guidelines that you might share?
As we go into winterizing for our cattle operations, our livestock operations, and we're using these front-end loaders on tractors to move bales around the farm. For our northern climates, when we get frozen ground conditions, let's try to stay away from those ruts that we made when it was a little muddy, because what happens now is those ruts become like boulders, and if we're driving over that with that full bale on the front, we could do impact damage to those tires. And then we've got hungry cows and or any type of livestock, and we can't move the tractor because we've got a flat tire. So just doing some precautions as we're using those pieces of equipment through the winter months to make sure that we're not abusing the tires unnecessarily.
Some of the forecasters have said we might have one of those good old-fashioned winters from the standpoint of extreme temperatures, and that could really put things to the test, couldn't it? Equipment and tires, I suppose.
That's correct. That's correct. So just make sure that we've got the proper inflation pressure in those tires as we go out. And remember, when we get huge temperature swings, so if, in my area in northern Ohio, we can go 70 one days and 30 degrees the next day. That natural temperature swing will cause the tire to lose air just through physics. So when we go from warm to cold, that's when it becomes real critical that we go out and actually check our inflation pressure to make sure we've got enough air in there to carry the load.
We appreciated the guidance there from Brad Harris, and he does know what he's talking about indeed. He's a grain and hay producer.
So he knows
New London, Ohio.
New London, Ohio. So he knows what it's like to have downtime in the field.
Well, and they've quantified this. At Firestone Ag, they have what is called the downtime calculation estimate, and it's $681 an hour. Think about that.
Wow.
That's what it would cost the producer. In terms of the lost time, $681 an hour. That's up 20% from the last time it was calculated in 2017.
And I believe that figure, given the input costs we've got and the commodity prices, that figure is going to be even higher in 2022. And I noticed Brad said, be proactive if you feel like you're going to be needing tires, because I imagine in the manufacturing business, they're struggling to keep up just like everybody else.
Yeah, like everything else, there are those delays. You need to plan ahead for those tires, as he was pointing out. Planning ahead on our broadcast coming up here over the next few minutes. We'll visit with Greg Solier. We'll have him look a bit ahead of us here on into the waning days of December to see how much winter there will be. Then we have Plant Smart, Grow Smart, continuing that series as we go to Minnesota. The guy didn't start out as a farmer, actually, right out of college, but he's back there on the farm with some great guidance on fungicides. That and more coming up on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Thanks for taking the time to join us here on This Week in Agribusiness. Max, it's that time of the year. Farmers are going back over their records. They're taking a look at the decisions they made during this last growing season and wondering, did they pay off? I know you had a chance to catch up with a guy who takes that very seriously.
And sometimes there are folks who keep an eye on an individual in the county or the township because they are progressive. They certainly aren't afraid to try new things. Terry Wellman falls into that category. We had the chance to visit with him at Hanscom, Minnesota a few days ago, not far out of New Ulm, Minnesota, a little bit to the west of Mankato. Terry farms there, and he's keeping a close eye on his fungicide needs, making note of the fact that he's been able to get results protecting that crop out in the field. I'm sure many growers around here kind of keep an eye on what Wellman's up to down there. Well, what do you tell them when they ask you about your fungicide usage and Revitec and Veltima and what they've done for you?
Well, fungicides aren't a big thing in this area yet. We don't have a lot of disease pressure, so when people see that I'm doing this year over year, I'm out in my field a lot with the sprayer, hey, what are you doing? What you putting on out there, right? So either in the beans, you're fighting insects or some foliar nutrition. Corn, same thing. I'm telling them, try it on your farm. Go buy a couple jugs, do some trials. You're gonna see some benefit there. On a year where you don't think you've got a lot of disease pressure, you still get that.
Have you been involved in the Revitec trials?
I have. Some of that has been directly through BASF, some of it through the Next Level program that I'm involved in. But I believe a lot of the goal is to get people with farmer-based data, farmer-based experiences to showcase here how these are the products that are working and the benefits that folks are seeing from that. So I think long-term, it'll be a pretty interesting data set that they're gonna have.
Share a little bit more about the BASF fungicides and your experience with those.
Yeah, so Preaxor was one of the first products that we started testing against. Then, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they introduced Revitec and Veltima, both products that extended your window, gave you more curative properties with it. With this latest round of chemistries, we're actually able to see a longer window of protection. You no longer have just contact-based. As the plant grows, the protection is growing with you as well. So that's a really cool thing.
You think you'll get the coverage you need on through the season?
We've seen that. We're playing with that. Our big thing up here is not a lot of disease pressure in general in corn, but we want to prevent that. There's tar spot that's not far away, so that's a disease that's coming in a little earlier. So I think a tool like Veltima will really let us get in front of that and ideally still make one application. So we're trying to find where our sweet spot is with various trials, various timings. So that's how we started with the fungicide originally. The plant health is a big thing for us. If I can go across the field earlier and know that I've got a longer window of coverage, that's a benefit to me, right? That's something that's appealing, and knowing that I'm going to be protected on the back end for those late season diseases, the late season health benefit push, that's something that's been positive on our yield results as well.
You bet we enjoyed the visit there with Terry Wellman on his farm. You can see more of that if you go to the website, plansmartgrowsmart.com. And we'll continue this series, the Plan Smart, Grow Smart series, in weeks ahead here on This Week in Agribusiness, working with the folks at BASF. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. It's not that unusual. We see some weather extremes these days, and boy, they've seen it in the Pacific Northwest. Greg, a lot of rain, much more than they needed.
Now, that's right, with river flooding along the Cascades, coastal sections, parts of the Willamette Valley, Rogue River Basin, upwards of a foot, foot and a half, and locally more, from a drought to a flood. But you get to the Cascades, the northern Rockies, and points out of the east, nary a drop of rain or even snow. We have a couple of flakes of the forecast here ahead of the next warm front as it takes hold over the northern and central high plains areas. Yeah, big sky country, 95% of the soil is dry, very short on topsoil moisture, blowing around on those 75 mile-an-hour winds at Cut Bank and over towards Great Falls. And we're going to do it all over again while there's another system holding offshore and some shower activity aggravating the wet grounds and conditions in the Pacific Northwest. It's another warm front and downslope flow winds in the lowest levels, upper level winds in from the west and southwest. And so that high wind potential is playing out here. A couple of snowflakes for the Canadian Prairie. So no organized moisture still for parts of the northern plains, those key drought areas. And into California, beautiful weather for outdoor work, heavy irrigation demand already. San Diego, not a drop of rain for the month of November. Haven't seen that since 1980. It is the rainy season, and a trademark of La Nina is ongoing dryness and drought and the lack of moisture into central and southern California and the southwestern part of the country. A couple of sprinkles, West Texas cotton, desert southwest. They're still back into play here for the late portion of the week. Another big warm-up slated I-80 corridor on southward over those dry, drought-ridden areas again. Pretty quiet weather picture. No rain in the forecast for Southern California and points on northward later in the week.
Your word warm on the map has me checking to see just what it is on the calendar here. It's a little bit warm for the year, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, over the past week, it was more or less an October to early November feel, but it's back to reality. Not a complete lockdown of the pattern. That's perhaps a couple of weeks out, but we're seeing some semblance of it over parts of the Great Lakes region. We had those snows last week, and they're back into play here early this week with this weather system on the move and a drop-off on temperatures just to more seasonal norms, the way it ought to feel for early December. But that is short-lived. Look at the warm front of the move into the Plain States areas. Another windy weather pattern for Big Sky Country. Warm back west of the Missouri, and a couple of sprinkles and snowflakes for the eastern Corn Belt. And the organized moisture again is early in the week, and that is it. If you're still trying to wrap corn harvest in the eastern Corn Belt, a few percentage points lingering. Should be able to get it done here for this week. West Texas cotton, parts of New Mexico, a couple of sprinkles, cooler air on the move into the Delta region. Not much going on moisture-wise, and that's another indicator of La Nina. We don't get organized moisture over these drought areas in this particular setup, and outside of the southern areas of Texas and the Rio Grande, a couple of showers there. Quiet weather picture on east into the Delta. More wind, by the way, Max, for the central and southern plains.
We have some folks traveling to farm meetings this week. We're in that meeting season. How does the eastern third of the country look?
Well, you know, as you would expect for December, a little snow in the air, some of it on the ground, windy, cold weather from the Sioux down to the Ohio Valley. Most of the organized moisture this week into the northeast New England, feeling like it should be for December for just early portions of the week. Another warm-up into the western Corn Belt that'll be slipping to the east with a couple of downwind areas of the Great Lakes, seeing some snow shower and flurry activity. Most of the organized moisture and a chill in the air late in the week over the northeast and New England. Another one of these cold bubble of high pressures settling into the Tennessee Valley, parts of the deep southern states that we're watching dryness and drought here. A couple of showers down through Florida, and the wet weather pattern continues on coastal sections late in the week with milder weather moving up into the Tennessee Valley.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. Well, Greg referenced the dry conditions in his earlier weather segment, and I have to ask you, sir, about, well, Montana, North Carolina. They have the entire state under a burn ban in North Carolina this week.
Yeah, saw some of the fires breaking out into the western end of the state and some of those forest areas, and there is some opportunity this week to get some meaningful moisture, not necessarily on a widespread basis. This will be primarily the western Dakotas, where we see some spotty to scattered returns of a quarter to maybe half inch. A lot of that will get certainly dried up with the high wind later on into the week. We think as the week wears on, especially the I-10 and I-20 corridor, half to 1 inch expected down here and towards the following weekend into the eastern states. Busy weather here for the far eastern Great Lakes, the northeast of New England, and a quarter to half, and that's still going to aggravate standing water and runoff issues into coastal sections of the Pacific Northwest as the week wears on.
We hit meteorological winter this past week.
Yes.
It didn't feel like it for many of us. What about the week of December 13th?
We're back into this milder to warmer than average weather pattern. When you get wind flow up aloft like this, the low-level winds are in from the west. The air sinks, it warms, and we're back into this scenario here. Comfortable with outdoor work and livestock, not great with dryness and drought. The last of this cold, temporarily so, into the northeast of New England. Normal temperatures southeast and slightly cooler than average into the valleys of California, Pacific Northwest, where we do see a little inkling to build some of that moisture southward, maybe as far south as Napa, as we approach and head through the mid-stretch of the month of December. Back to high and dry weather over much of the western Corn Belt, Plain States areas. Somewhat weather down through Texas. This is good news in the Carolinas and southern mid-Atlantic region, and most of the winter weather, if you will, storm-wise, expected across the northeast and New England.
Then winter officially arrives that week of Christmas. Will there be a chill to the silver bells?
We'll try and see what we can come up with, and hopefully maybe, wheels down for Santa with some snow and a white Christmas. We'll see what we can do. But semblance of a pattern change. We're finally dislodging this cold and locking it up across the southern Canadian prairie, a little sliver running across the northern interior states. That warm ridge by certainly fall standards and winter standards suppressed down southward. Here's that winter solstice date on the 21st, by the way. And the moisture pattern picks up as well, finally getting it into parts of Big sky country. The southern Canadian Prairie, upper Midwest, northern and eastern Great Lakes region into the northeastern New England. Still a bit wet down through the Rio Grande of Texas.
And to wrap up the year, that week of the 27th, that's a date that shall live in infamy.
Oh, really?
Mrs. Armstrong and I have a round number anniversary, number 40. Boy,
congratulations.
You talk about the patience of Job. she shows it every day. What does the weather look like?
I've heard stories. In any event here, good snuggling weather, maybe that's the way we'll put it here through the Canadian Prairie, upper Midwest. Look at the cold, and it's going to lock in for the rest of winter. Here, the warmth over this part of the country, it's a west, northwest, east, southeast orientation in the trough across the middle part of the country. When that happens, yeah, problems here. Dryness, drought, fire, southwestern part of the country, but a busy winter storm pattern. Canadian Prairie, much of the Corn Belt and points out of the east, and more rain. We need it down through the Carolinas.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Some people would argue, keep it original. Don't dramatically change that tractor. Well, I have an idea for one exception, perhaps. In Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. You've heard me talk about them. See them on the website, storelock.com. The purists among us would say when you restore the tractor, well, restore it as close as you can to the way it might have been coming out of the plant. However, if it has a crank, you may want to put an electric start on it by all means. That's what they did in Pennsylvania with this F-14. Tom Williams' F-14 there rolled out of the Farmall plant the same year he was born, 1936, and I bet it did its share of work. The tractor even survived a fire 2 years ago. You couldn't tell it by looking at the way it looks now, restored by Nevin Horning in Denver, Pennsylvania. Tom's sons, J. Craig Williams and Tony Williams, have enjoyed that tractor too. A real nice looking F-14 on what was a dairy farm at one time. It's a grain farm these days, not far from 3 Mile Island in the Harrisburg area of Pennsylvania. Let's check in with Mark Stock to see what's going to be sold by those folks at Big Iron Auctions in the week ahead. Here's Mark's weekly report.
Well, Max, we have seen record prices on the retirement auctions being conducted on BigIron.com the last few weeks, and we have some really nice equipment selling the entire month of December, including the Jerry and Jeannie Sommerfeld retirement sale in Halstead, Kansas. They've got a John Deere 9100 four-wheel drive tractor, a John Deere 4560 two-wheel drive, plus they've got a Miskin 17-yard pull-type scraper that will sell. RMS Farms, Inc. retirement out of Wilson, Kansas. They've got a Cat Challenger 35 track tractor. They've got a 2013 Landau 6230 29-foot disc. They also have a New Holland T6090 mechanical front tractor with a loader. Selling in Arthur, Illinois, John and Sharon Daly from Arthur, Illinois will be selling their meticulously restored International Farmall tractor collection. They have 20 tractors that are worth your viewing. They'll sell on December 8th. Also, in American Falls, Idaho, Stoats Equipment has several items selling, including a John Deere S670 combine with 674 separator hours. They have a pair of Case IH Patriot 4430 self-propelled sprayers, plus they've got a John Deere 635D draper head. Folks, all of this equipment sells on December the 8th on BigIron.com. All items max sell with no reserve and no buyer's fees.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide. We stand for you.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to continue our salute to the FFA, and lately we've been getting to know the National Officer Team. Joining us this week is Eric Robinson. Eric is the Southern Region Vice President for the National FFA Team. Eric, tell us what states make up the Southern Region.
Yeah, so hey, I'm Eric. Like I said, I'm glad to be here. And the Southern Region is Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Puerto Rico.
That is a big geography, a lot of different types of agriculture. Eric, what are you excited about here over this next year as you go out and work with members?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a lot so far since I've been elected, and it's really made me just think about what am I excited for? And the #1 thing is just to go. I'm ready to go and see and meet everyone other than the southern region, western region, eastern region. I'm ready to go every single place, meet so many great members, and see what this organization is really about to other people.
So Eric, you are still new in this role. Do you know when that travel is going to get underway and when you'll start meeting members?
Yes, so in January, about mid-January, we'll actually start and we'll do a little experience week in Kentucky, and we'll go see and meet FFA members there. And even actually as early as December, like this month, at the end of this month, we'll do some chapter visits in Indiana. And then whenever we start traveling on our own, that'll be around February once convention season starts for some states. And we'll start and we'll be flying, as Miss Cindy says, and we'll go out, we'll go meet people, and that's whenever all the fun starts.
Well, Eric, before we let you go, tell us, what was it that prompted you to get involved with FFA?
So that was my middle school ag advisor, Mr. Tom Lanier. I actually was not involved in FFA in the slightest, but I was running track and playing football, and then I ended up getting hurt in football. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I want to do now because I can no longer be a pro athlete because I'm injured. But Mr. Lanier came around and he was like, Eric, I want you to get involved in the FFA. I want you to come to convention and see if this is something you want to do. And after a lot of pestering on his side, I finally said, you know what, let's do this. And I went to my first convention, experienced the lights, the camera, the action. I just saw retiring addresses, people winning awards and being celebrated for their successes. And I fell in love with it.
Very cool. We wish you the best of luck. Eric Robinson, Southern Region VP.
Coming up, we'll share a visit about a program that unites young people around the world, 100 nations, to tackle some of the most pressing problems of our planet. Before we leave you this weekend, we have to share with you something that you need to know about, the Youth Ag Summit that involves young people from around the world. And it's an outreach of the folks at Bayer. Beth Roden joins us here, Senior Vice President and Head of Communications for Bayer US, and also Tori Laird, one of the young people involved in the Youth Ag Summit. Tori, this had to be a tremendous experience for you just to be involved with people from all around the globe, correct?
Absolutely. It's been incredible. There's 100 different delegates from 40 different countries, and I've gotten to meet each and every single one of them virtually, at least. And so it's been quite a wild ride so far.
Beth, am I correct in my understanding that the effort is to put on the plate for these young people the challenges of meeting food insecurity, but doing it in a sustainable fashion all around the globe as best we can to bring these young people to the table for the discussion? Am I right?
That is exactly right. It's about bringing these diverse perspectives. They're all change makers in their own local communities and really harnessing the power of bringing these 100 bright leaders together to discuss their projects and the work they're doing in their countries and how we can learn from each other and then ultimately create a more sustainable food system.
Why is this such an important initiative for Bayer, Beth?
Yeah, we really are passionate about growing that next generation of leaders and change makers who really want to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. And I would say Bayer is a company that believes not one person has the answers. And so through partnership and collaboration, we really have the opportunity to see the difference that we can make. So by really bringing these, 100 delegates in from 40 plus different countries, they get to come in, they learn from us, we learn from them, they advance their projects, they're all socially, active entrepreneurs back in their markets. And so it really gives a great opportunity to see what the next generation is up to. It gives me hope that, we will have a better tomorrow due to the work of all of these young, bright leaders.
Hope is important, to be sure. Tori, you were one of 6 from the United States, were you not?
Correct. Yes, there's 6 different delegates here in the U.S. I've gotten to represent Kansas here out in Manhattan.
You're with the Kansas Department of Agriculture there, native of Southern California. So you brought a different perspective, I'm sure, than others from the United States did. But why is it important for a young person such as yourself, personally, living in agriculture, working in agriculture, to have a place at the table here?
There's one thing that one of the speakers spoke about at our Youth Ag Summit, and they said something along the lines of, this generation will witness our successes and failures. And that's really stuck with me. The problems that we're facing today are not new problems. They've been ongoing. They've been around a long time. Just they come in a new context. And now they're definitely in a global context.
There is a website, is there not, Beth, where folks could drop in and just see what it's all about?
Yeah, you can visit bear.com. You can also follow Youth Ag Summit on any of our social channels. You can Google it and you'll get plenty of content and information around the delegates from this year and the previous delegates and the great work that they're all doing in their local markets.
Beth Roden, Tori Laird, thank you both. We appreciate your sharing a little time with us here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Max, it's really neat how Bayer has created a global collection of young people.
You know, we have 4-H and FFA developing the leaders of tomorrow. This is bringing some of these more mature young people, I guess you would say, around the world to tackle some of the most pressing problems of the planet right now.
Yes, indeed. Young professionals at work, Max.
Yeah, you are going to be tackling some subjects on your new radio show, Agriculture of America.
And I'm really honored. On December 27th, I will be moving into the host role for AOA. I'm very excited. Agricultureofamerica.com if folks want to see what stations we're on, Max.
Excellent. Oh, and to get on your calendar also, coming up Christmas weekend, our special Christmas show on This Week in Agribusiness. We hope you'll be with us for that too. Thanks for joining us here. It's always a great honor for us to come into your home. We look forward to the next opportunity. Have a good, safe week, everyone. So long. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.